Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and today I'm joined by an even more special guest than I usually have. Abram Buhner is dead. Long live Jordan Deeb, my guest here to talk about Pokemon Day and the Pokemon Presents on today's Pokemon Day that featured Legends Arceus, featured Pokemon Champions, featured a bunch of other stuff that I'm not really sure we're going to get too deep into. But,
Probably not.
Jordan, thank you very much for stepping in when Abram has long since passed and bringing your passion for Pokemon to talk about what we saw today.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it really sucks that I had to kill him to get here, but
Yeah.
you do what you got to do
Look,
sometimes.
I support you. I
Thank
support
you.
you.
And that's what's important.
But
But no, happy Pokemon Day.
oh man, it's a holiday for all of us who care.
Really is.
But it's especially a holiday because let's be honest, it's been years since we've had real major Pokemon news. I mean, Pokemon TCG Pocket was a big deal last year. I actually have never even downloaded it. I don't really care.
I've never been into the card games.
Yeah, me neither. But last year we got the teaser for ZA, which I'll talk about a lot today, and that was kind of it, and TCG Pocket revealed. But then the year before, it was just DLC for Scarlet and Violet, and so it has been 3 full years since a Pokemon Day show has had real major substantial information to talk about it, and that is
For sure.
easily the longest we've ever gone without major Pokemon news ever.
Yeah. And like even like when you're talking about like a couple of years ago when it was like, oh, there's Scarlet Violet DLC, it's like, okay, we got to presents closer to the release of the first DLC. We got to presents closer to the release of the second DLC where they
Yeah.
a deep dive. Then like in the past, we've gotten kind of multiple a year giving us smaller updates. Pokemon has been silent
Yeah.
for 365 days now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like we haven't heard
Especially
shit
Game
from
Freak.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like obviously, their socials are gonna keep socialing and like
Yeah.
there's gonna be promotions and stuff going on in the games, but like there's now been a Pokemon Presents for an entire year. They've been cooking.
Yeah, yeah, and that is, I think, something we're going to frame a lot of this conversation around is ZA, as we now know, releasing in late 2025. Before this point, it could have been at any point in the year, but it is indeed a Pokemon game, and so it will be releasing in the third week of November if I had to bet my life on it.
Yeah, probably.
Which means that it is not only their major holiday game, it is not only 3 full years after the release of the last mainline Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet, in November of 2022. But it's also coming out after the launch of Switch 2, if the Switch 2 comes out before November, which it probably will. So there's like a lot of different layers to this that make this game, I think, even more interesting to talk about than our usual Pokemon game, because the trends have been broken. The timeline has been fractured, and we're now kind of in a new era of Pokemon that hopefully comes from response and feedback to what happened with Scarlet and Violet, a game that you and I liked, but that they needed to take
Yeah.
some feedback for.
Certainly had its issues, and it's like I feel like you can't just talk about Scarlet and Violet. You have to talk about it in the context of Scarlet and Violet was the third Pokemon game to come out within a calendar
Yes,
year
yes.
when it came out. We had two games come out in 2021 or 2022. Or
Yes.
no, sorry.
No, you're right. Yeah.
November 21, we got BDSP.
Yes.
January 22, Legends Arceus.
Yep.
November 22, Scarlet and Violet.
Yes.
So 3 games within a calendar year. Granted, one of them wasn't done by Game Freak for better or worse. But now they're like, no, we've given you nothing other than DLC for about 3 years now.
Yeah.
And here is our next real big push into a game. And it is important to remember also that like the Legends games so far, obviously they're telling us here that they're breaking a lot of patterns, which
Yeah.
you can't really claim a pattern's been established with one game in, but Legends Arceus kind of gave us a glimpse into what an open world Pokemon game would be like with the open
Yeah.
zones. So I wonder here, like, what is kind of the tease for the next big development?
Yeah,
I
interesting.
like, I'm not gonna claim it's the battle system, and I'm
Yeah.
sure we're gonna get more into that. But one, I'm very excited that battles are a little bit more real time now rather than strictly turn based. But I wonder if honestly the thing that this is like teasing and showing is the mixture of putting Pokemons into cities rather than just
I would
strictly
love
on
that.
routes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we dive into ZA, I think that is probably the thing that I will be most excited about and praising for this game. But I also want to quickly mention that one thing that I think a lot of people were thinking might happen today, because ZA was announced 1 year ago, not released last year, and is now releasing, well, as we knew, it was released in 2025. That there were people speculating that maybe there was another game, if we remember back to the 2022 or 2021 Pokemon Presents, where they revealed BDSP and Legends Arceus back to back, and of course they've released relatively back to back. And it's now been 4 years since ILCA put out a Pokemon game, and so there was like, will there be Black and White remakes? Will there be this like Synapse game that we got some rumors and leaks about? But I don't think we're getting another Pokemon game this year because I think it would have been revealed today.
Yeah, I mean,
And I'm happy about that because it means that a Legends games will now get a. This is the year for Pokemon Legends to be its own thing rather than kind of getting like half stomped on by two other mainline releases within a calendar year.
for sure. Yeah, and like, Synapse, I believe, is what Pokemon Champions was.
Oh,
which
okay, okay.
Get announced. As far as I know,
Gotcha, okay.
I think that
I thought it was
yeah.
supposed to be like a hero shooter or something. I thought we saw like leaked footage of
It's-
like riding on like a Blastoise or
So
something.
that was something called Rodeo. That was
Okay,
I don't know
my
if that
bad,
was
my
the
bad.
official name or
Yeah.
the test name. I also got them mixed up until I re-looked into the leak stuff,
Mhm.
and of course the Terra leak gave us a lot of this information.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Synapse, I believe, is what became Pokemon Champions, which
Sure,
got
makes
announced today.
sense. Yeah.
And as they said, that's being worked on by not Game Freak directly, but by Pokemon Works, which, if I remember correctly, is sort of the Game Freak Ilka marriage of Pokemon.
Oh, that's right. They did
And I wanna be
announce that.
clear.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk shit about developers. I don't think Ilka inherently does bad jobs. Ilka
Yeah,
does Pokemon Home, and I think they've done a couple of other small
One Piece
things.
Odyssey, Sandland. They've been a support studio on a few things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots
of
I
Bandai
honestly think that
Namco
a
stuff.
lot of the BDSP issues just was more Game Freak being like stick traditional.
Yeah. And
Um,
also get the shit out fast.
That as well.
Yeah.
But if they're making the models for Pokemon Champions, if they're making some of the battle animations, of all my complaints of BDSP, those are not them. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll look a little bit more into Pokemon Works because they announced that, but I don't think we'd heard that company name or studio term until today, unless I just completely missed it. But I do remember there being something about Ilka and Pokemon Company teaming up a little bit deeper. They have like an Ilka office inside like Pokemon Company headquarters or something, and maybe that's what Pokemon Works is, which is interesting because does that mean then this is ostensibly like a sub Pokemon team that is like
So-
would technically Pokemon Works have developed BDSP if they'd been around, in 2021? I don't know.
It's also important to remember that the Pokemon Company itself is a
Yeah.
very weird company structure
Sure,
where
yeah.
it is not its own thing. It is a company that is kind of created by three other companies. It's
Yeah.
a mixture of Game Freak, Nintendo, and Creatures Inc.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I'm reading from Nintendo Life, March 12th, 2024. The Pokemon Company seemingly has set up a new subsidiary in Japan called Pokemon Works after the
Okay,
company
okay.
was registered on March 4th, 2024. And then Joe Merrick of Cerebi also posted that at the time. And it says, yeah, it's entirely possible that Pokemon Works could be linked with Ilka in some capacity, although although the latter also has numerous dealings with Bandai Namco. So Ilka has
Yeah.
a lot of stuff to do with Bandai Namco. So yeah, it sounds like it is more of a support studio kind
Sure.
of branding per
Yeah.
se.
Though I think it's exciting and interesting that that this is like in a more official team, which and obviously we know now that they're making Pokemon Champions, which is its own project, and that does mean that Game Freak, though they haven't really done like too much work on mobile games and things in the past, that they're not going to be the one that is working on these like more specifically spin-off titles like Champions. And so we now technically have like a second official Pokemon team to like deal with in
Yeah.
terms of like number of games that can come out, number of spin-offs, co-productions and stuff like that. Hopefully the teams can like balance over time and we can like get a sense of like what each team does because this is all basically new information to us.
And what's good about that is like Game Freak's biggest issue is that they are an incredibly small developer for dealing with
Yeah.
the most profitable franchise of all time.
Yeah.
They are incredibly small. They put games out at a regular rate, but not anything
Yeah.
amazing. Obviously, we've had issues with the way they do their games
Mhm.
as well, and it's like, you look at the other spin-offs, anything from Pokemon Go to Unite to even back in the day, Ranger games,
Mhm.
Mystery Dungeon games. Game Freak never really was a part of those.
Yeah,
It was
sure.
more the Pokemon Company gave the license. Maybe people from Game Freak gave guidance or rules on how to use these
Sure, yeah,
characters,
yeah.
but each of the companies that made them respectfully got to kind of do their own thing. I mean, when you open up the original Pokemon Snap, it's HAL Laboratories.
point,
It's
yeah.
not Game Freak.
Mm-hmm.
So this does seem like you're saying like it's more official. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, Game
Mm-hmm.
Freak doesn't have the manpower for this, but Game Freak is at least directing this in
Mm-hmm.
some capacity.
Yeah, yeah, and we've actually seen Nintendo actually branch out and do that quite a bit. I'm thinking back to last year with Echoes of Wisdom, the mainline 2D Zelda game that was not developed in house at Nintendo, but it was co-directed and Aonuma had some involvement in it, and so I like that we're now able to maybe get games at a faster clip because Nintendo, Pokemon Company, all of these teams are able to like guide other teams and support them to produce projects, which is something that I think other AAA publishers and production companies can take note from. It's like, imagine if Rockstar was like helping guide some other smaller teams to make like smaller Rockstar-esque projects. Like the games take so long to put out now that teaching smaller teams like Ilka or Grezzo or whoever to, or I guess the Pokemon Works, to make games that sort of support your schedule is why Nintendo's able to put out like literally more games than Capcom, Sony, and Microsoft combined.
Yeah, absolutely. And it almost feels like it's like a Marvel Games esque approach.
Sure. Yeah,
Like,
interesting.
This Pokemon license is massive. There's a lot we can do with it if we at least give these teams maybe a little bit more direction than just a license. It frees up the ability to do other things for us to really focus and cook on Pokemon ZA for a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so let's dive into Pokemon ZA, Pokemon Legends ZA, releasing in fall of 2025. How did you feel about this first look at footage we got? I think there's a good amount of information in there in terms of
For sure.
what is different, what the structure is going to be, a couple of the characters. We do have from the official Pokemon website some character art, a little bit of details about what the game is about, and also a overview map of Lumio City that sort of gets us a idea of what the actual scope of this particular game's map will be. But how did you feel about that first look at gameplay?
I mean, I loved everything I saw. Some of my predictions personally were wrong, but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't mean that I disliked what I saw. I mean, it uh, it's a it's such a densely packed city. You could tell because
Yeah,
the cities in the Pokemon games are like two houses and maybe a Pokemon
yeah,
Center,
yeah.
right? If it's like a major place. But this is like you think of GTA, you think of Cyberpunk. Games take place in one city all the time
Yeah, true.
and are great. So I'm really excited to see what a densely packed map can be for a Pokemon game, let alone
Yeah.
real-time battles is something I've wanted for a very long time, and
Yeah.
it sounds like they are finding a way to do it that is still takes inspiration or aspects of the turn-based
Yeah, of course.
formula that we all know and love slash maybe just deal with. No, like Pokemon is the one turn-based exception for me.
Yeah.
But it just I think back to how Legends Arceus gave us the what was it, strong style or agile style, and
correct.
that lets you sometimes do multiple moves at once. But now we also get to add in actually dodging and switching Pokemon mid battles, and like
Yeah.
little by little, it's like, do we eventually get to anime style battles where kind of anything's possible?
Yeah. Well, that is the best and worst thing about Game Freak and their history of so many games. I mean, they put out games close to on a yearly basis for the last 30 years. And it hasn't really been, for me, until the Switch era that we've seen them really try with each game to try something very new and to bring something into the Pokemon formula. And what we've seen for their entire history is baby steps forward. We'll introduce this, we'll try that, we'll take it away, we'll reintroduce it later in a different form. But I think we've seen a lot more specific progression and experimentation leading to like successful ideas in the Switch era, as you can see overworld Pokemon being introduced in Legends Arceus and co-op being introduced, and then those being brought back in other games, and then active catching being introduced in Legends Arceus, now being in Legends ZA, and Wild Area and Sword and Shield. That's the first big area. Then that comes back in even bigger ways, and now we have a Wild Zone. So like they're really, I think, building and testing different things over the course of multiple projects. And Legends ZA, of course, now hopefully leading to a Generation 10 maybe next year. I think that's pretty likely given.
I'd hope so. Gen 10 30th anniversary
Yeah.
seems like a perfect like time to like kind of line those things up.
Yeah. And also then would be the longest time between mainline Pokemon games since I think the gap between Gen 4 and 5 was 4 years, but every other gap has been 3. So it's 2003 for Gen 3, 2006 for Gen 4, 2010 for Gen 5, 13, 16, 19, 22, and now we're in 2025, and thank God in heaven, Gen 10 is not coming out this year. That's not going to be
They
a
didn't even
rushed ass
tease it.
game.
They didn't
No.
even, like, one of my predictions was like they weren't going to show it. Like, you know, I remember back when Scarlet and Violet first got like revealed. I was
Yeah.
like, no way, they're doing Gen
Yeah,
9
yeah.
already. 'Cause it really just felt like Sword and Shield had just come out at the time. But like
Yeah.
this time, they didn't even give us like a, hey, here's the titles, or here's even a They didn't even
Yeah.
say, and we'll see you next year for 30th anniversary and
Yeah.
Gen 10. Like they're not even confirming it, but like I imagine it's going to happen that way.
Yeah, but to Legends ZA, I am also very happy with what we've seen. It does seem like this is structurally and intent-wise a very different kind of game. Of course, we know that that's kind of what Legends is. It's like a chance for them to experience because Legends Arceus was also pacing-wise and structure-wise very different. I love that game. I think Legends Arceus is easily the best Switch-era Pokemon game for me. And Legends ZA being, I think that the battle system looks a lot more interesting to me because I'm someone who's not particularly a fan of the traditional Pokemon turn-based battles, and it was always kind of like disappointing to me to go back to that in Scarlet and Violet after feeling so free in Legends Arceus. But they're taking the shackles even further off in Legends ZA, where you can apparently, and this is one thing that I'm curious to learn more about, though we won't for months, I bet. Is the idea that you can move your trainer around like you could in Legends Arceus, though that didn't really mean much. It was kind of just flavor text. I don't know. It was kind of cool. But you can also apparently move your Pokemon around in Legends ZA to position and aim attacks because they have a certain amount of distance that they'll, like AoE and stuff. Is that maybe like trainer on the left stick, Pokemon on the right, and then D-pad to select the move? Well, it actually looks like the face button selects a move. So maybe you are like Astral Chain or Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, like controlling both characters with the joysticks.
Interesting. See, I took it as your Pokemon moves where your character moves, so it was going to be one stick.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, let me pull up the footage. I don't think I got the vibe from that, but you could be right. Let me.
I feel like I noticed like the Pokemon tended to generally follow where the trainer went, and I do. It doesn't surprise me if like internally Game Freak is like, we don't want to fully make it that when you go into a battle you now control the Pokemon.
Oh no, okay,
100%.
you're definitely right. No, you're right. I just watched a clip. You move your trailer. Totodile's like a couple spaces away from you, and it follows the arc that you're taking. So no, you're definitely right that they're like linked together, and that's fine. I mean, that's less complicated than what I proposed.
Yeah, I mean,
I might have just screwed up the recording, by the way. Sorry if you guys just like saw like nothing for a second. I'm OBS. I like have to be clicked onto Discord in order for it to capture, so I probably just fucked them up. Oh well, it was only a few seconds. You can deal.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, like the dynamic battle system is honestly, I think one of the aspects, or probably the aspect I'm most excited for, because I do want to see, does it only exist in Legends, or is it going to eventually find its way into the mainline games? Because nothing similar to the agile and strong styles found its way into Scarlet and Violet.
No.
Scarlet and Violet was, for all intents and purposes, incredibly traditional when it came to the battling system.
Definitely.
Obviously, we got the generational gimmick, and then the game's big step was being fully open world, but battle-wise, nothing different.
Yeah. Oh, the only thing that it carried over, quote unquote, from Legends Arceus was battles taking place in the environment without like the little circles underneath you, which even Sword and Shield had. But I think that it's actually very possible that Gen 10 is something different. I'm gonna give it a 30% chance that Pokemon Generation 10, next mainline game, has a more active battle system than Scarlet and Violet does. I give it 30% because that 30% comes from Scarlet and Violet. I don't think was ever going to have a different battle system because it was developed concurrently to Legends Arceus, and so there wasn't the we know what fans like from this, we can incorporate that. Those were separate projects that were working on at the same time. Now we have not only Legends Arceus has been out for a long time, and obviously they worked through it, but they were working on Legends ZA at the same time, developing those things. So 30% possible. 70%, I don't think it's likely because I think they want the new unique types of battles to be happening in the Legends series and spin-offs, and then I think they want traditional, like, it's Pokemon. You know how it plays. We're not fucking with it. The competitive will be the same in the core new generations of Pokemon titles. So that's why I
Yeah,
give it a
'cause
30% chance.
I do think that the professional competitive scene is the biggest thing preventing Pokemon from doing something that's fully real
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I would love to see it and even have VGC kind of adapt to that, I do get that as much as I want VGC to
Yeah.
be Pokemon anime simulator,
Mm-hmm.
they want it to be chess,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
intents and purposes, where it's like you're going to do it this way. It's really all
Mm-hmm.
about the numbers. It's all about the strategy. There's nothing else that
Yeah.
can get in your way.
Literally decades worth of like math and charts and all this shit that they've built up.
Which is why I look at it, I'm like, this isn't fun to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and
Yeah.
also is why, just shifting gears away from ZA for a second, why I don't even know if I'll play Pokemon Champions at all, but I think it is a really exciting announcement for other people, and so I just need to like step outside of my mind for a second and be like, look, Pokemon Showdown, which this is ostensibly an official version of, has been incredibly popular for years and years and years as this free thing that people can do online and really test the limits of Pokemon battles and strategies, as you were mentioning, and the math aspect of it. It seems like they're kind of translating that here in an official capacity, and that is such a good idea, and they're going to make so much money on this game. Just like TCG Pocket last year was like, oh my god, how did it take them so long to do this? Pokemon Champions is absolutely that.
No, and like, don't get me wrong. As much as I'm like VGC does nothing for me, I spend a lot of time on Pokemon Showdown
Oh, okay.
because I could do one-on-one battles.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
not a big fan of the double battles.
Sure.
They have their own tiers as well, and
Mhm.
I'm not taking it too seriously when I do it. It's more just something to do while I'm sitting there. Oftentimes, I used to do it in class or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
if I'm on a phone call
Yeah.
or something. But like just, I'm excited for Pokemon Champions.
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon Stadium, I think was Pokemon Stadium might have been my first Pokemon game as
Oh.
opposed to a traditional.
Cool.
Um, it's weird, like Stadium, Puzzle League, and Yellow all kind of blend into the same time frame for me.
Yeah.
But like, no, don't get me wrong. I loved Battle Revolution. I'm very excited to see this, especially if it is. You can transfer your Pokemon over. Just call a friend online. If it's like me and you, like we're not really caring about EV training. It's more
Yeah.
for the vibes. It's more for the a casual. Like I absolutely love that, and I'm excited to see kind of what the animations are going to look like.
Mhm. Yeah, because we really didn't see too much of it. It was a very quick trailer. And also it's
And
in
yeah,
development. So it's probably not even a 25 game. I think they would have indicated
it.
that if
Yeah.
it is, which is fine. Doesn't really matter too much to me. But one thing that I am curious about, again, even though I'm not that interested in Champions, is how they handle Pokemon and your EVs and IVs and things like that, and like what kind of modes there are for how serious you want to take it, and especially which Pokemon do you get access to? Because they highlighted, and I think this is great, the fact that you can use Pokemon Home to transfer Pokemon from Go or from the mainline games into Pokemon Champions and use your specific Pokemon that you train. Great. That's what
Mhm.
kind of what you could do with the like. You could use like something to transfer. What was the game? Not the Game Boy games. It was like one
So
of those Stadium XD games you could like put Pokemon into from. Your
yeah,
other
so in
games.
Pokemon Stadium, if you had the Game Boy Reader for the Nintendo 64,
Yeah.
you could use the Pokemon you actually used on your cartridge rather than the shitty ass rental Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Which I never had the Game Boy player, so I've only ever used the shitty ass rental Pokemon.
Yeah, yeah.
But that is cool. And then I believe that I never had a GameCube, so I don't know if you were able to transfer up to XD and Gale of Darkness.
yeah.
Kind of the same way, but I did have Battle Revolution at the same time that I had a DS with a copy of Pearl and Platinum,
Mhm.
and that was you didn't even have to really transfer. That one was more like, hey, there's a mode, it's going to wirelessly connect, and like rather than the battle happening on your DS screen, it's happening on the Wii.
Sure. Gotcha. Yeah.
Honestly, as much as I just said like VGC is not for me, I really hope that Champions becomes the site of where VGC takes place, because the way I like to think about it is it'll allow for that to be so much more. Right now there's like different regulations, and
yeah.
any professional or any VGC battles that happened before the Scarlet and Violet DLC were limited to whatever Pokemon were available in Scarlet and Violet
Yeah.
base form.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I would.
Oh, sure.
I
To
would,
not. It's like people didn't have to buy the DLC.
Well, not only that, I'm even saying like because the battles always take place in the game that is the most the most current.
Yeah.
So after Gen 8 had the Dexit and not every Pokemon's available, you are then limited to whatever Pokemon are chosen by the
Oh,
Game
sure.
Freak to be available in this game.
Yeah.
I would hope that Champions has models for all
Yeah.
1,025 of these
Yeah,
motherfuckers,
yeah, yeah.
and that you can use any combination. Maybe just you can't use two of the same type of Pokemon on one team. Blah blah blah. All that. But what I mean is, I hope that it's not restrictive to
Yeah.
what Pokemon are available, and
Yeah.
that I honestly think it's where VGC might move, and in a way should move.
I agree.
Where if this is going to be where it's nicer graphics, if this is going to be maybe more customizable, the one thing I'm curious to see is this going to be a battle simulator, but you still have to train and EV train the Pokemon yourselves, or is this going to be a thing of Showdown where they straight up are like, hey, just pick your EVs, pick your
Yeah.
IVs. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because the way people
I
have
kind of doubt
described
that.
listen, I like the idea of like, no, you have to actually train them yourselves. Like that's part of the vibe of this franchise. But I have heard people make the argument of like, because there's been people that play VGC that use like Pokehex or whatever to, excuse me, not make it illegal Pokemon in the sense that they're learning moves or have abilities that they can't actually have, but rather than spend 100 hours to get bottle caps and use them. It's just like, hey, I'm just going to hack these IVs the way I want it. I've heard people make the kind of comparison of like, why does it matter if I buy a chess set versus make a chess set out of wood myself with my own two hands? Like, and I kind of get the point of what they're saying. If it's truly just about the skill of reading your opponent and picking the best moves and using certain strategies, etc., should you have to go through all this? I would personally like to just see a half, meet somewhere in the middle where it becomes incredibly easy to EV and IV train in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see how Champions chooses to adapt that.
Yeah, and for me, I think it would also be exciting, specifically because of what you mentioned earlier, that in a way, the competitive scene is holding back mainline Pokemon games from being more experimental in the way that they introduce different Pokemon, balance different things, can change up the battle system. And if, as you're saying, Champions becomes this is where competitive battles take place, we're able to gear the design of this game, the balancing towards what makes the competitive scene happy, taking their feedback, not have to apply that necessarily to the mainline games, but to where the competitive battles are taking place. I think that's probably better for almost everyone because Pokemon works and Pokemon Champions can then be having a more back and forth with the competitive scene, and then Game Freak with the mainline games is able to stretch their legs a little bit and unshackle themselves from, we need to have a type of mode in each game where you're able to like Pokemon Me or Pokemon Camp or whatever, where you're able to like sort of influence the EVs and IVs. You don't necessarily need to include these different things. We might be able to trim out some abilities or moves that might be bloating that like competitive players like, but that aren't really that useful in the core game. Like there might be some interesting balancing and design ramifications that come from separating that into two entities that are able to speak to each of their markets and audiences in the way that they want to, and hopefully both be the better for it. If Champions is also good, who the hell knows?
The thing is, like, if it's just a battle simulator, if Battle Revolution was Pokemon Stadium 3, and this is, for lack of better words, Pokemon Stadium 4, I hope I don't end up eating these words, but it's like, how bad can it be exactly? But you know what I mean? Like, it's just
microtransactions
it's just a battle simulator.
Somehow. Probably.
99 cents a move.
Yeah. Jesus. No, but they will monetize the game. I don't know if they said if it would be free or not. It seems like something they're pretty good at making their mobile games free.
Yeah, the fact that it's coming to mobile makes me think it's free, but again, if this is truly just we're taking the ranked battle side of all the games and making them into their own game, but you don't necessarily have, you probably have a very basic avatar. You're not going to have like 3D environments you have to move around.
Yeah, true.
You're not even catching Pokemon because you're most likely transferring Pokemon that you already have.
Yeah.
I can't, not saying that they shouldn't monetize it, but it's like,
they will. Don't worry. They'll find a way. Life finds a way.
It's probably going to be all the cosmetics, I guess, for your avatar.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because, again, I really just think that this is just going to be, like you're saying, Pokemon Showdown, but official, which is nothing special when it comes to an actual video game. Again,
Yeah.
there's not going to be a story. There's not. Again, if I'm comparing it to Battle Revolution and Pokemon Stadium, those had more than just that. But something about this felt different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's also that they're making this a cross-platform title. Of course, it'll also be made available on Switch too. But what we know today is that it is in development for both mobile and Switch, which I really like. I think Unite and fucking Pokemon Quest, I think, are the only like cross-platform Pokemon titles that we've seen.
As far as I know, yeah.
And Unite is, as far as I know, it's solid and it works great on both. And I think for me, it also makes it feel a little bit more official because it's on Nintendo hardware as opposed to fucking Magikarp Jump or whatever. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how this fits in. But my mind keeps returning to this is such a good idea. I mean, Pokemon has so many different kinds of fans who play the games for different reasons, and the competitive scene is one of those. That's a major part of it. And speaking specifically to that audience and finding an official way to, frankly, make money on them is something that I'm sure they're very excited about. And we saw it with TCG Pocket last year. Again, digitizing an aspect of what makes people such big Pokemon fans and finding a way to make that not only a pretty good game as far as I know for TCG Pocket, but also a way to make more money on people because they'll buy the physical cards and they're like, but I also want it in the phone game. Yippee!
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with Pokemon Champions.
For sure.
But now with that out of the way, we can return to where our bread is buttered in Pokemon Legends ZA. What do you think about the visuals of this game? I had heard some rumors that it is much closer to Scarlet and Violet. I think that is true from like it seems like the resolution and like the general lighting engine is quite similar, but also the models are in a similar like more realistic style than we've usually seen out of Pokemon games. But I will say that I think it looks better than Scarlet and Violet, not only because we don't have to render like big vistas, things aren't as pixelated. There's still definitely some like some jank as like the camera moves and like the pixels have to re-render the models. But I think also the color palette is a lot more pleasing. It looks like the Pokemon models have a lot more animation to them. So I'm really happy with what we saw. I would personally prefer something a little more stylized. I think Let's Go is the best looking game on Switch, followed by Sword and Shield, which I think has a lot better color palette than the games we've seen since then. But as a step up from Scarlet and Violet, which are pretty goddamn ugly, I think this is a really good step in the right direction.
For sure. This does seem like it's Scarlet and Violet's, I guess, like style, but with the saturation of Sword and Shield. And I've turned Sword and Shield on after playing Scarlet and Violet and went, oh wow, like
Whoa,
this is pretty. Whoa. This is nice.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But like even the models themselves look to be better than we've seen in Scarlet and Violet.
Definitely.
The textures and all that. And we're also seeing a game that's not out yet, so of course some of these graphical errors can be forgiven. And then it's also like, well, how much of this was also, we're watching this over a live stream.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
So there's definitely gonna be compression and stuff there. Like when they post it by itself later, I would love to just watch it again and really take it in. But I honestly have no complaints about how it looks. Whereas like I remember when Scarlet and Violet first got revealed, like it was like, oh yikes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is also a testament to that game's scope and Game Freak not being, frankly, particularly able to polish to the scope that Scarlet and Violet required. And it's very smart, I think, to strip down even from Legends Arceus, which is also a pretty big game and also had its share of like low resolution and muddy textures and stuff, to a game that is designed on its own value to be in areas that are smaller, and not because the map is smaller. Probably is, but you won't really feel like it. But you don't have to render the amount of distance and far away objects as in either of those past games, because this takes place in city corridors, on streets, in courtyards. And let's talk about the biggest element that makes this game interesting is the way that it is balancing and incorporating Pokemon and wild battles and exploration into the structure of Lumiose City, which is an urban environment. I'm very excited about that. One of my favorite parts of Sun and Moon were these small pockets of like grass areas and routes that you could like go into in some of the cities and like find some Pokemon in there. They were separate. You had to enter a gate to like go in there. but it was a step that the other Pokemon games had never taken. There was always a hard cutoff, or sometimes even like, in like Gens 3 through 5, how there's like the little hut between the routes and the cities, where it's like a guy behind a desk and like an information skill. It's like, what the fuck is this? Like in reality, what is this little like house tunnel that you have to like walk through? I mean, in reality, it was a loading zone, but I always thought it was like that was like a weird reality breaking thing. I'm like, why does this happen? Um,
Yeah.
but Legends ZA is also narratively, gameplay wise, but also narratively incorporating what they're calling wild zones, which you do have to enter through these specific like holographic gates or whatever. But the Pokemon are in Lumio City, and now I will say I'm interested to hear where your pros and cons lie on this. The one part that I'm like mixed on is that it seems like the wild zones are just like, this is where in the city we let Pokemon do whatever they want, because there's like, like Pokemon just like hanging out by cars and stuff, and I'm like, this isn't a wild zone. This is someone's fucking house corner. What are you doing?
Yeah, I would like to see, I guess, more of a dynamic version of it. Like, I imagine if this game was the same concept, or it's like one city, but rather than Lumio City, it took place in like Castelia City from Black and White, right? I'm like, oh well, there's the Central Park area, which of course I would imagine would be like basically the wild area of this version of the game, and then you have the subway tunnels, right? And in here, it's like, I wonder if it gets more dynamic as the game goes on, because if the whole point of this research project is to let humans and Pokemon live together in this city, I would like to see a more dynamic of like, here is a cafe that's by a canal, and you can sit down and enjoy a little bit of coffee, or you can choose to kind of look into that canal and what's it called? Throw a Pokeball at that concher that we saw. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm interested to like. I do like the Pokemon anime a decent amount. I'm not saying I've watched all of it or love it, but like there's some episodes and journeys where it's like, oh, there was a Score Bunny who was running around the city and like stealing food to give to like a pack of like Nickets, right? And it's like that idea of like, yeah, there might be stray Pokemon in a city that are even interacting with the city, and you could catch them in this like alleyway or near a dock, seems very interesting to me, rather than being like, well, here's where the people live, and then here's where the Pokemon live, and here's where more people live, and then here's where,
Yeah.
I do want to see a sort of mix.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they balance it, because we do see trainers like catching water Pokemon off of a dock, and like and as I said, there's like small Pokemon hanging out by cars and stuff. So it is literally mixed, but also again, there's like not only the like holographic gates. It's like, all right, you're entering the fucking wild zone, but it also seems like they're numbered, which doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But it's like, all right, here's zone number 2, and presumably you go through them in a certain order. So I think it's maybe just like a design thing, as like they're trying this for the first time. They're like, we have to have a balance between what counts as routes, which is the wild zone. Those are where the wild Pokemon live. I also think it kind of does make sense in terms of like pacing of the game, because they can lock off a wild zone because you're not ready for it, or fucking power is down, whatever. And it means that there are you can choose when you want to be in the higher stakes adventure aspect of being in the wild zones and fighting Pokemon and catching Pokemon, or you can be in the relaxed environment of Lumio City and just take in the culture, talk to people, not worry about a Raticate or a Pidgey, coming up behind you and throwing you in a battle.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why it's as more separated than maybe we were hoping for or expecting. But it also has this extra layer that I don't think I was really expecting of the map is divided into these segments, and of course you're mostly going to be in these little wild areas or walking on the streets, but you can also go on the rooftops, and on the rooftops you can like parkour and like double jump in the air and fight other Pokemon up there. We see someone using a Hippowdon on a roof to fight a Talonflame, and that was not something I was expecting at all, for there to be this verticality to it. And I think that for me is what really makes me excited for the exploration, is how does that mimic kind of what we did in Legends Arceus, where maybe we'll get ways to like climb and like glide or whatever to like really open up the environment a little bit and find secrets and find hidden areas and like drop down into like courtyards that are accessible from anywhere else, and so you have to kind of have this sense of level design that Pokemon honestly usually does not have. So I'm really excited by what we saw in terms of the verticality of the map, which kind of does go against what I was saying earlier about like having to render like far distances and stuff. But I'm glad that they're including it because it makes the map seem a lot more dynamic rather than here just the hallways are going down.
Yeah. I I think that there is a purpose to having at least a little bit of a division, like you're saying, of like, okay, you don't want to be constantly bombarded with battles in like the main city area if you're doing just general exploration or whatever. But I also think that like it's not going to be as big a deal because like this isn't Legends Arceus where it's like survival aspect and humans haven't
That's
learned to
true.
like, conquer Pokemon yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like we're going
You
to
don't have a
have
health
like,
bar.
you don't have a health bar, and like from what we've seen, and maybe there'll be a few Pokemon that do, because like even in Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet, there are Pokemon that choose to chase you versus Pokemon that you have to chase. But yeah, I didn't get the vibe that there was going to be any Pokemon randomly attacking you the same way. But I could see the rooftops being a little bit more of a, for lack of a better like word, like almost a wild zone in them of themselves, because how many people are there on the rooftop? So yeah, probably a lot of flying types found their way up there, and then you get to explore up there, but like there's not going to necessarily be a lot of people.
Sure. Yeah. That'll definitely be interesting. I also wonder what it means in terms of progression because as I said, we see like numbered gates, so I assume that's like kind of the order you can go through, which again is fine. You know, I appreciate that there's some sort of progression. I think one thing that is definitely a pro and con about Scarlet and Violet is that it gives you maybe too much freedom, and you can kind of find yourself in areas or doing gyms that are either too hard or not hard at all for you.
It's too open world for a game that's not level scaled.
Exactly. Yes, and so that is something that won't be an issue in this game. But also, Lumiose City is divided into what we see from the map. If you take a look there, different colored sections, and so it seems like if I look at this, one thing we know narratively is that your character is like showing up to be like a sightseer, visit Lumiose for the first time, and you stay at a hotel run by AZ called Hotel Z, which is kind of fun, and then you get sort of pulled in, as far as we know, to this narrative of building up Lumiose City into a place where Pokemon and people can coexist, run by this corporation that has a funny name that I can't remember off the top of my head because it's only been about
Quasar something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Quasartico, something like that. Yeah.
I do remember, like Quasartico is correct. Because I do remember, I do dip my toe into leaks and rumors and stuff, and the one thing that I've seen that seems to have been correct so far, because I've seen it on multiple things. Team Quasar does seem to be what people were saying. Now it's
really
Quasartico. Well, people were originally saying that was like what this group was going to be called. Was that where that could be a translation thing?
Mm-hmm. Might be, yeah.
You know, because I don't know who's getting these leaks. I don't know how accurate they are, but like, yeah, Quasartico is, I'm double checking what it's called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're gonna be evil. Of course, they're gonna be evil.
A part of me, like, I really hope that like they're a red herring, because it's like, I don't want to play the Sword and Shield story again. I barely liked the Sword and Shield story the first time, you know. And like, I hope it's just not as obvious as like, okay, yeah, the people I'm working for are the bad guys, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did a pretty well. I will say, narratively and character-wise, I like the character designs a lot, which I think I can't really say. I'm pretty hit or miss on the Scarlet and Violet character designs. I think some of them are pretty good, but I think we've only seen a handful of like meaningful NPCs in this. But I really like the designs. I like the way that AZ has kind of grown. He's got his little bow tie on, and your rivals look pretty good. I like the gradient to their hair. I think that's pretty interesting. And then the two Quasartico employees, the CEO and the secretary, I like their designs quite a bit. And
I like that they're swapped, gender norms.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Not in this universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I also have a solid amount of faith in the Game Freak team to make this narratively more interesting because I do think that Scarlet and Violet and Legends ZA have some of the best written characters in the entire franchise. They do feel a little bit more substantial. There's some more variety in there. You know, think to Professor Laventon and Kari slash Ray. You think of all your like buddies in Scarlet and Violet that have like really interesting journees.
And the way they're riffing off of each other once you get to Area Zero.
Yeah. I mean, God, that's a great section of that game.
For sure.
But I have a good amount of hope for the story of this game because I also really do like that this is idea wise kind of what's also carried over from Legends Arceus, but the idea of people and Pokemon coexisting is something that has been talked about at face value across the course of the series, but has never really meant anything meaningfully to the gameplay of the games until Legends Arceus, where you were kind of introducing the people of Jubilife Village to Pokemon and having them work together a little bit more. But it's a lot more explicit here. And it's also about conservation in a way. We see that, and it's mentioned on the Pokemon website, that Lumio City has a lot more greenery now, where they are trying to incorporate people and Pokemon and reintroduce some wild zones to the city to, you know, recover from the fact that this is just a bunch of concrete around here. And so I like that as a narrative thrust, and it feels very different from other Pokemon games.
What gets me is, obviously, we know that Zygarde is going to play a big role in this.
Mm-hmm.
Legend Z, we see his 10% form, we see his cells in the trailer. But, you know, Zygarde's whole lore is that, like, he acts up when the environment starts to become destroyed, which is why originally when this got teased last year and I started making my predictions as to when this would take place and what the story would be, I thought it was going to be like either the original building of Lumiose City or a rebuilding of Lumiose City.
Yeah.
That obviously if you're rebuilding a city, you're going to have to make room for places where people can congregate or live, which means cutting down trees. And I thought that would be what's aggravating Zygarde.
Interesting, yeah.
So if what they're doing is adding natural environments, what I'm like wondering, like, what reason does he have to get angry? And then it's like, okay, is it going to be a whole thing of like, well, as much as they're adding, they're draining resources for all the power of this tech, and you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's still a way it can happen.
Well, I mean, that is where the they are probably evil thing comes in for me, where it's like Zygarde is probably here because at face value they're recovering the city and returning it to some sort of balance between, you know, tech and nature, which was interestingly enough also a theme in Scarlet and Violet of like tech versus like the past and all that kind of stuff. But they're doing, there's some nefarious shit going on. We see this one shot of like scaffolding around building and stuff that's got Quasartico logos and all over it and stuff, and I'm like, that feels ominous to me. That feels like a place where something shady is going on, like, you know, a Team Galactic-esque base where like they're doing some sort of experiments on Pokemon, or, you know, there's some sort of energy thing, like kind of like Sword and Shield, that they're, as you mentioned, like they're draining. So I think that there is a reason, but I think us as Pokemon fans, it gets our minds going of like, okay, lore-wise, Zygarde's supposed to be here for a specific reason. What ramifications does that have on the narrative and mean for the characters?
I don't know. I've never heard of a billionaire tech company that claims to be doing something good for the environment being bad for it. That doesn't ring a bell at all.
Are there any other aspects of this game from what we know so far that you want to make sure we cover? First time seeing it here?
I mean, that we know of, not off the top of my head. What I actually, I want to talk about a couple things regarding Pokemon and their alternate form / mega evolutions.
Oh yeah, great.
Because
there's some things we didn't talk about.
When I think about one of the biggest things that made me go, this game's going to take place in the past, was one, if these are Pokemon legends, these are stuff that aren't confirmed, maybe they only somewhat happened the way that people think, right?
Yeah.
Like, hypothetically, the events of Legends Arceus probably happened in a general sense, but it's a legend because nobody fully knows the details of it. Okay. This taking place in the past, especially if it was like a real far back past where maybe even the climate was different, I was like, okay, that gives us room for, you know, different forms, the way we had Hisuian forms of other Pokemon. But here, if this takes place arguably post X and Y,
I think it has pretty clear because AZ is back and he's got like a, you know, job. rather than being like a hobo.
Yeah, I mean he's over 9 feet tall, so I don't know why he's running a hotel and not playing for the Knicks. But okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm like wondering if this isn't going to give us any alternate forms because,
Yeah.
or if it's again if it's alternate forms, it must only be of Pokemon that came out post Gen 6. Because like, what reason would
Yeah.
like I'll use this to segue into the starters, but like, we got Hisuian forms for all the starters in Legends Arceus.
Sure.
We were able to transfer every single Pokemon that existed to a copy of X and Y. What reason does a Chikorita or a Meganium have to be different in Kalos now versus Kalos in 2013? Other than, well, we didn't think of this idea yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they've been pretty good at making sure that like this, we've never went back to a region yet since we've gotten alternate forms and just suddenly added forms retroactively like
True.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Hisui's the closest parallel, but it's not really the same.
But again, it takes place so far in the past that all the alternate forms make
Pokemon,
sense.
yeah.
So that's what gets me. And then,
But Jordan, life finds a way. Game Freak will find a way to do this stuff, whether it is some sort of corruption that is like spreading from the ground. Maybe there's like some, I don't know, like goop or poison or something that's like corrupting Pokemon and like changing their physiognomy a little bit. It's also interesting because I think unlike Sinnoh, which I think has probably the worst regional dex in the entire series, and we felt that with BDSP especially. Kalos actually has a really good regional dex. I love the variety there. They've got things from all the previous regions. We didn't see, to my knowledge...
Well, they needed to because they only had like 70 Pokemon.
Well, of course, yes, that's a good point. We didn't see, to my knowledge, any Gen 7, 8, or 9 Pokemon in the trailer. And I don't think there was any Pokemon in the Legend ZA trailer that weren't available in X and Y. So it's possible that just because X and Y has a very diverse regional dex anyway, they don't need to pull in any other forms. I would be a little bit disappointed in that, but I would get over it pretty quickly. But I also think, well, there are three things to consider. Will they introduce regional forms, Colossean forms of either older Pokemon, insert whatever goddamn lore reason, or maybe don't insert a reason and just have them there because whatever, who fucking cares? Another thing is, will there be unique evolutions for Pokemon, as we saw in Hisui and Galar? Some of those forms evolving into new versions of Pokemon. You get Vernorigis, or you get Weirdeer, or you get Ursaluna. These are new Pokemon that are based on these older lines, which new evolutions I think are possible even for older lines. There's also a lot of short, like 1 and 2 lines in Kalos, easily built upon. Carbink can evolve. Hawlucha could have a baby Pokemon. We can get a third Heliolisk. We can get a third Go-Go. Like these things can be expanded. Where it's like there wasn't a lore reason why Happiny wasn't available in Gen 1. They just hadn't thought of it yet. There wasn't a lore reason why Electivire didn't exist yet. Like they don't care sometimes.
And I can accept evolutions like just kind of coming up whenever, then I can, I guess, the forms.
Sure, like Colossian forms. Yeah.
And I will say, I'm a little disappointed in the starter choice.
I agree. I agree.
Just because what made the Arceus selection so special is that it was 3 random starters from completely different regions. Mm-hmm. Here we have 2 out of 3 of them being from Johto.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm a Johto boy.
Yeah.
But it seems like a very weird thing to break in the Legends. Again, how much of a pattern could be established with one game, but it does seem like
now we know it's
weird
not
choice.
A pattern.
Yeah, which is almost, I don't know. I'm a little disappointed by it because I would have liked that to have continued to be a pattern. I will say though, if I could put my speculation cap on, is there a reason they want to be pushing these Johto starters? Mm-hmm. Are we getting? Listen, obviously the next remake to come out would probably be a Unova remake. Yeah. But the region we haven't visited the longest is Johto, because those remakes came out before Black and White.
True.
And then this is something I believe is going to happen. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't even give us anything in the trailer today, but there's got to be new Mega Evolutions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was going to be my third thing. And Jordan, let me Put my hand on the freaking X and Y Pokedex Bible and let you know the honest truth is I fucking hate Mega Evolutions. I do not care for them
Really?
at all. I think they're the
Aren't
most
you like the biggest X and Y fan?
yeah, but I don't think I almost ever used Mega Evolutions. I was like, no, these are
Interesting.
stupid. And look, that was me especially just being like a whiny little baby and whatever.
Mhm.
But I vastly prefer Gigantamax and Z moves as gimmicks.
Because it's
What's the-
available to everything.
not only that, but I also I don't particularly care for like we created a new form of Charizard or Lucario or whatever, but it's not actually a new Pokemon. Fuck you. There are
get what
some
you're
Mega
saying.
Evolutions that are more different from their base forms than they are they're bigger design evolutions than like a usual Pokemon evolution.
For
And I'm
sure.
like, that's a new fucking Pokemon, but it's only temporary. Ew, and it's just called Mega whatever. I'm like, I don't care. But they're bringing it back. People like it. I'm fine with it. But
Yeah.
I'm not even really that interested in seeing what new megas they add because it just doesn't interest me.
I will say, I do think that so far the gimmick I've connected to the most have been Mega
Yeah. Oh, it's
Evolutions,
true
and
for
I
most
feel that,
people.
and I
Absolutely.
also feel that if you do look at the general consensus, it's like Mega Evolutions first, and then honestly, Terra became the second best one of like, hey,
Terra's
yeah, this
at
is
the
available.
bottom for me. I fucking hate Terraforms.
Really?
Because you just make it crystally. Shut the fuck up. They look so stupid with the hats on their head. Get the fuck out of here.
I guess, yeah. I'm you know what? I'm with you on how
Gameplay
it's
wise, I
implemented.
understand. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I'm mainly talking from a gameplay perspective right now, but I do get that the designs of the Terras of like,
Yeah.
hey, if this is some ancient thing that used to happen, why is there a light bulb for
Yeah,
the electric
true,
chair?
yeah.
No, Terras definitely could have been designed in a better way. I honestly would have just appreciated the aura without the hat.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I agree. The fucking
Yeah.
hats, dude. I hate the hats.
but I do think that from a gameplay mechanic, Mega Evolutions and Terra's, I would go Mega Evolution, Terra, Z moves, Dynamax, just because Dynamax felt to be like it's even more temporary because it's only three
yeah.
turns, and it's like Z moves and Mega Evolutions combined in a weird way.
Yeah, true.
Um,
And big.
but I'm interested. Yeah, they're big. But the thing is with X and Y doesn't really lean into the Mega Evolutions. None of the gym leaders use them.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
think only
Karina has one, but she doesn't use it.
She doesn't use it in the battle.
Yeah.
She just has one and teaches you about it. But like, if it was up to me, I would be like, hey, those gym leaders towards the end should all be using
Yeah, of
one
course.
Mega at the
Absolutely.
end to really push it. And it was also that Megas were only ever for old Pokemon, not for
Yeah, I was
any
just about to bring
Pokemon
that
that
up.
existed in Kalos.
Mhm.
Which is why I have another theory that the way we got the Kanto starters as a second set in X and Y. I think we're going to get a second set of starters
Mhm.
in this game, and I think that they're just going to be the Kalos starters,
Very possible. Yeah.
and I think that they're going to get Mega Evolutions.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's not a Mega Meganium or Feraligatr or Emboar. So they will definitely get megas, and that will probably be the.
But see that I don't know because
Nah, they fucking gotta.
why give Meganium and Feraligatr Megas and Typhlosion
And not
just gets a
Typhlosion.
form?
Yeah. Oh, oh, you're right. Because Cyndaquil was already used in Hisui.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
well,
like
why give Typhlosion a form and not Meganium or Feraligatr? Like I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
the thing is, if they were each getting one thing, where one got a maybe let's say an exclusive Z move or exclusive Gigantamax form, one got a Mega Evolution, one got a form, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do all or none, it's like they either all have to have the same or they all have to have different. It doesn't make sense to be like two of them got Mega Evolutions, which are arguably better because it's actually a power boost.
Yeah.
One of them just got an alternate form with a type change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you remember back to X and Y, you're right about the introducing the Kalos starters and giving them Mega Evolutions. Really exceptionally fucking dumb that the starters from Kalos did not get Mega Evolutions in that game. Exceptionally fucking dumb. But if you recall, they did give special treatment. Charizard got 2 forms. None of the other ones did. None of the other ones did.
X and Y was absolutely the start of the real big Gen 1 pandering that happened after people were mad that you couldn't catch a Pikachu in black and white, and that's not fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and actually, I think most of the Mega Evolutions in X and Y itself were were Kanto Pokemon. It wasn't
Mainly
until
Kanto, a
it
good
wasn't.
chunk of Hoenn because of Oras.
Well, no. I mean in X and Y. Oras was the one that really started diversifying them, but I think the original batch of Mega Pokemon I think was almost entirely Kanto Pokemon.
Well, I mean, I definitely remember a Mega Absol, Houndoom, and Scizor in X and Y.
Yeah,
But you're right, Oras definitely pushed more because it gave some to the Hoenn starter trio,
yeah.
the Latis. I want to say Salamancers also
No,
didn't
there,
come
there was
out
plenty of them.
till Oras.
Camerupt, Sharpedo,
Yeah, anything that a major
Aggron,
boss had.
Mawile. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lopunny for whatever fucking reason.
Yeah, and that's the other
Audino.
thing is
What are we doing? Why does Audino
Mega
have a fucking
Evolutions.
Mega?
It's like they're mainly Kanto and Hoenn. There's a couple of Johto mixed in.
Yeah.
There is 2 Sinnoh because there's Garchomp and oh I guess 3 Garchomp, Lopunny, and Lucario.
And Gallade, technically.
Okay, yeah, and then there's 1 for all of Unova.
Yeah,
for
and,
some reason
and
it's
one
odd
for
enough.
Kalos, which is Diancie, which is crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you had to make a movie.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's a weird. Oh wait, another Gen 4 one. Abomasnow got one.
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah, but regardless, it is very imbalanced. You're totally right, and I really wonder what they're going to do, especially for Pokemon that are newer than Gen 6, of reincorporating them, some Alolan Pokemon, Galarian Pokemon, Paldean Pokemon, maybe just a couple, and giving a couple of them Megas. I don't know. They might not. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But I'm just curious to see what the balance is because I think, for me, obviously regional forms and these expansions to lines introduced in Alola, I think it's decently handled there, though I really don't like that they're all Kanto Pokemon. Again, leading into that, fuck you, fuck off. Galar.
I will say,
Oh yeah.
I give, Sun and Moon were the 20th anniversary of Pokemon
Sure.
games. So I give a little bit more forgiveness of Kanto Pokemon being the the only regional forms
Yeah.
in Sun and Moon than I do than mainly Kanto Pokemon being Mega Evolutions
Sure.
in X and Y.
Mhm.
Especially because it's like, well, regional forms, while Mega Evolution was a gimmick we didn't think was going to come back until this day last year,
Yeah.
regional forms were very clearly they're here to stay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
well,
we-
I think they were even more surprising because you see Executor or fucking Wheezing or like, huh? What the hell? But again, I think that they have ebbed and flowed in terms of my personal like how well I think they did on it. Because I think Galar actually probably did it best. There was a lot of regional forms. They introduced some evolutions like Runrigus and Mr. Rhyme and Berserker and stuff. And then in Paldea, they were like, I don't know.
See,
It's like 2. I'm like, what? Why are there only 2?
This is my hot take. I wish that it was just regional forms and not regional evolutions.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I do think that they started leaning into the regional evolutions a little bit too. Like, it's literally a generation later. We started adding those, and those became more important than I think just strictly regional forms.
Yeah, sure.
And like, something like Paldean Wooper turning into Clodsire versus Quagsire to me is like, I could take that a little more than like, okay, we're gonna make a Galarian, Zigzagoon, and Linoon, and then only the Galarian Linoon can now evolve into a third form that
I
the
see.
originals aren't getting.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to see more of a strict parallel to the whatever the regional forms they're doing
Yeah.
are.
But the reality is, there's no rules to any of this. They can do whatever the hell they want. They can introduce Paldean Tauros, and that's it. That's the only fucking thing. It's just, I don't know. It's just it got a little red on it now. Fuck you. I fucking hate that shit. God. But
There's definitely better and worse ways to do it.
Yeah.
I also like some of them I do think like they don't experiment enough. Like,
with the design.
Partially. I mean, half the Alolan forms are just it has hair now.
I know. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, somehow Growlithe getting a white fur makes it a rock type, and like,
Oh, sure. For
I don't know.
Hisuian Growlithe, yeah.
yeah. Honestly, I would have loved to see, because Hisui had a lot of snowy environments. Give us a Siberian Husky ice type Arcanine.
Oh, that'd be sick, yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
well,
like
another interesting thing though is this being one environment. How are they really going to handle type variety? We don't have a desert area. We don't have a snow area. Everything takes place within Lumio City. And so will there even be, in X and Y you can go to the snow area and you find Vanillite
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Cryogonal and Swinub and all this stuff. And I really like Kalus's environment variety, and it allowed for quite a bit of different type variation. But it could just be that they don't really care. But it also could
Weather?
be that maybe. But then like
Or even the seasons from like black and white, depending on, or let me cook for a second.
hold on, he's cooking.
What if they're trying to manipulate the weather, and that's when Zygarde's like, hold on a fucking second.
And,
know,
and,
like,
the
oh,
changes
man,
in the
I
weather
want-
are changing the Pokemon's physiognomy, and that's where you get the. What if we get like seasonal variants of Pokemon?
That would be it. I do. Okay, this is gonna be a short rant, but
Yeah.
a little off topic. I was very disappointed that in the Indigo Disc they didn't like buckle down and be like, regional forms are really just climate forms, and
Yeah.
if you have a regular execute and you evolve it in three out of the 4 places in Indigo Disc, it's going to become a regular executor. But if you
Yeah.
go to the tropical one and you choose to evolve it there, then it becomes the Alolan. Like, I really wish that they had hammered that in, that it's really just about the environment.
Yeah,
I feel like the Indigo Disc would have been the perfect place to do that, and they didn't.
true.
But maybe that's what they do here. You know, maybe
Yeah.
that, like, if there is some sort of weather manipulation aspect of the story that
Yeah.
gives us different forms.
Yeah, and we do have again the sections of Lumio City are generally colored in different ways. There's a green, a light blue, a red, a pink, and a yellow one. I don't know. Those only kind of correspond to types, and they certainly don't correspond to like a particularly interesting balance of types. It'd be grass, water, fire, fairy, and electric. But I don't know if that. I think it probably will be some sort of general type variation that changes over the course of the game as you visit the different sections. But look, we're only thinking about this because we're deep up the ass of all this. We're totally in the weeds. They've got answers to this, but it's these small answers, these small questions that we're asking that will make us most excited when we see them answered in one of the like short trailers they randomly upload to YouTube on a Tuesday morning. We're like, oh, look, okay, so this is how they're handling this. Oh, whoa.
Basically, yeah. Do you think, you not liking Mega Evolution aside, do you think there's a chance that they're like, nah, there's no new Mega Evolutions, this is just a revisit into Kalos?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they've taken basically every other opportunity to add new forms when they revisit stuff, except for BDSP. That Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire had new versions. No, I guess Let's Go didn't really have anything that you could.
Let's Go
bring-
didn't add any new, but they let you trade
Yeah.
or transfer the Alolan forms in.
Yeah, which is funny because now and then it kind of makes sense retroactively of why there wasn't Alolan forms of other Pokemon, because then you wouldn't be able to bring those in. You can only bring the Kalos ones in. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
God, I love Pokemon. I love thinking about this. It has been years since I've been like excited about something Pokemon related because it's been years since they've done anything. And the only other wrinkle to this is that we probably won't hear anything about this game for a couple of months. This happens a lot of every time we get a Pokemon game announced early in the year. They go freaking rock silent on it for months until the summer when they start actually releasing information at Cadence. Though it's not like we're gonna have a lot of games to play, and also there's going to be Nintendo news in April, and maybe even before then. I don't know. I doubt it. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about this game. I'm happy that it's getting as much time to cook as it needs to. I'm glad that it's getting its own year. I'm glad that we don't have another this competing with Black and White remakes or Johto remakes or something. And then we'll get Gen 10 next year, and that's a good cadence. Give the games a little bit more time, experiment a little bit more like it seems like they're doing here. And I don't know, I'm really looking forward to this game. I think this is definitely one of my most anticipated, and how different it is makes it, I think, a lot easier to get excited for this than other Pokemon games, because there are so many questions that we still need to have answered.
For sure. And what I know we were talking about, like, a lot of like what we thought would be patterns in the Legends game being broken here. Depending on how much is broken, hell, I remember saying this last year that just the title of this game alone told us that Legends isn't actually going to be about certain specific legendary or mythical Pokemon. They're just different stories that take place in this world. So I'm excited to see if this is incredibly different than Legends Arceus, what that implies for the Legends branding of games.
Yeah. And I think it also does mean that the fact that we're getting another one, this is something they want to commit to, and this might be
Yeah.
generally their replacement for remakes, or what it certainly is a chance for Game Freak's designers to try things that they're quote unquote not allowed to put in the mainline games, which I think is really exciting. And so this post Legends era, I think, is the most exciting time to be a Pokemon fan, because you don't know what's coming next.
No,
We're getting a fucking Kalos game set in modern day, only in one city. It's fucking insane. What's going on?
Everybody was betting on Johto and Unova remakes last year. No one even came close to predicting this.
No, God no. But that brings us to the end of our over hour-long conversation about 3 minutes of footage. Thank you very much for joining me, Jordan. Maybe we'll come back for more information in the summer when we start hearing more about this game. But look forward to Legends ZA, and stick around on Backlog Banter for more coverage on this game, because I'm a Pokemon jackass, and I can't wait to do more in the future. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.